Good evening. My name is Margaret Erickson, the CEO for the American Holistic Nurses Credentialing Corporation, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce James Welch. Jim began his career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia, fresh out of college with a degree in life sciences. Upon returning to the United States, he entered the nursing school his mother had attended. He worked as head nurse at the Philadelphia VA, then was hired by the state of Delaware to coordinate the AIDS and HIV activities. He spent the next 20 years as the AIDS coordinator, working to improve prevention, care, and treatment for individuals with HIV infection. He then was tapped to create a healthcare bureau within the Department of Correction to improve the mental and physical health for those incarcerated. And Jim, I know that you had a holistic approach and dealt with cognitive, emotional, psychosocial, and spiritual as well. During his time at the state, Jim worked to incorporate mindfulness, healthy diet, exercise, and wellness in those he advocated for. He began his holistic nursing journey with Seeds and Bridges in February of 1997, completing work for his holistic certification in 1999 when he received his H&CC Holistic Nurse Certification. Currently, he is also a court-appointed monitor for jails with emphasis on improving the physical and mental and holistic health of those incarcerated in jails and prisons. It is truly my privilege, Jim, to introduce you tonight, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Mickey. And you're right. This is a night with a lot of friends that are on. So many of you know me. Karen, we've worked together. I have a sinus infection, so I may be a little raspy tonight, but I'll move on and move through this. My current position is I am a federally appointed consultant and what's called a monitor for a regional jail in Virginia. And my job is to go in when the federal government has seen that inmates are not getting care that they should be getting, whether that's physical or mental health care and behavioral health care. And what we do is we go in, and I'm not beholden to either side. I'm the independent person, and I work with both sides, the federal government and the local lawyers and the entity that I'm working with, the jail, to try to improve health within the jail itself. So when Mickey and I talked about what I do, I said, well, this is really public health nursing. And she's like, oh, it is? I said, yeah. When I started in public health and then I went over to the correction side, it was like I'm seeing the same patients, the same type of patients, patients that are disenfranchised, patients that have not gotten care before. And so I'm going to quickly go over some of the mission of public health, talk about some of the statistics in jails. Specifically, tonight we're going to be talking about jails because I also work with prisons. And then after that, I have a couple of questions to kind of move the conversation forward to see how comfortable you all are with thinking about taking care of people, taking care of inmates, patients in the jail setting. So the mission of public health is to improve the health of the community, especially for those that are underserved or have obstacles. And incarcerated persons meet the criteria. People held in correctional institutions often have higher levels of chronic illness, as well as substance use disorder and behavioral health challenge. Moreover, people in the correctional system tend to be disproportionately from underserved and disenfranchised communities. So to keep it simple, I'm just going to talk about at jails. In 2021, there were 6 million, almost 7 million admissions to local and regional jails. And on any given day, there are over 600,000 persons in a jail. 69% of those persons in the jail are unconvicted. That means that they're either waiting trial or in some way are there waiting to get a sentence or get a hearing. So that only 30% of the persons in the jail are convicted. And that's another issue that I think is an important piece is there in our system of justice, you're innocent until proven guilty. So 69% of the people there are innocent until they're proven guilty. Racial disparities are evident. In the US population, we have 13.6% are Black and 34.8% in the jail population are Black. In the US population, 75% are white and 48% are white in the jail population. And in the Hispanic community, the Latin communities, 19% are Hispanic in the US, 14% are Hispanic in the jail population. With the specific jail I work with, it's called Hampton Roads Regional Jail. Right now, there are 312 what's called average daily population. So there are about 300 inmates at any particular time in the institution. They can hold up to 1,000 inmates in that specific institution. But because of staffing shortages, they've had to cut down the number of beds they've had. And if I look at the population that's there, 41% of those 312 have a serious mental illness. And serious mental illness is defined as one or more mental, behavioral, or emotional disorders resulting in serious functional impairment, which substantially interferes with or limits one or more of your major activities, such as schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, paranoid schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, bipolar, or PTSD. And out of those 312, 86% of the population are on some type of medication, and 63% of those are on psychiatric medications. So the type of patients that we have in that institution, women who are pregnant on methadone, dialysis patients, patients with HIV, patients with AIDS, patients with hepatitis C, hepatitis B, cancer, ongoing cancer treatment. We have right now one COVID patient. We had upwards of 47 in 2021 when I was there. MAT, which is called medication assisted treatment for substance use disorders, endocrine disorders, neurological disorders, cardiovascular disorders. We had 2 patients that had a cabbage of those coronary artery bypass graft this year so far. And we have 3 other patients that most likely will have a cabbage by the end of the year. Hypertension, we have probably about 50% of the population has some form of hypertension, tuberculosis, and diabetes. So most of the people in the jail had very limited access to health services before being incarcerated. And as such, they are often in worse shape than the US population as a whole, even taking into account racial disparities. So my questions, and there are 2 of them, and think about these and put them in context that you're in a jail environment. If I ask you to think about the people that public health serves, how you feel about them, or if you feel they deserve care, and what thoughts and feelings do you have? And then secondly, if I ask you to think about the people that are in jails and how you feel about them, if you feel they deserve care, and what thoughts and feelings do you have? Especially when I go back to 69% or 70% of the persons in jails are there and have not been sentenced yet. 30% have been sentenced. The other challenge that we're having is there's even a more severe shortage of healthcare providers than in the broader world of nursing. Part of this is money, and another larger part is the fears and prejudice. So there are fewer nurses who work in corrections that have a holistic background. And my third question is, how can we change it? So I quickly went through those stats. If you need them, I'll have Mickey put them up so that you can get them later. But what are your thoughts?
Does anybody want to make a stab at what he just asked? And Jim, before I do that, Teresa asked, where in Virginia do you work?
I'm at Hampton Roads Regional Jail, which is in the Hampton Roads area, which includes Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Hampton, Newport News, that area. If you go down Route 13, it's right at the south of Route 13 at the bottom where the Atlantic Ocean comes into the Chesapeake Bay, that area.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I live in Northern Virginia is why I ask.
Oh,
And
cool.
I lived in Charlottesville when I was at UVA, but I'm up north now,
Ah,
Prince William County.
gotcha.
Jim, Deb has her hand raised. Deb, unmute yourself, please.
So I'm just going to share a little story. I had the privilege of working with a graduate student as her, her capstone mentor, and she was in community health and hospice, and her project was to develop, and she was a volunteer at the prison, the Ohio Correctional Reformatory or whatever. I don't know the correct name of it. And she worked with individual men who were never going to be released and were likely going to. Okay, so she became really interested in and for her capstone project, she developed a holistic orientation program for volunteers. And I want to say that was an act of Congress to do that, because there was so many rules and regulations. It was just unbelievable, but it happened. She got it done, and we all were so that I just preface that, because fast forward now, she's come on faculty as a community health educator and has taken students to the prison for their clinical experience. And this is what I want to say happened to the prison, the students. She came to me because she just wanted to vent. And so the students were they were deeply moved by their experience, and they had an amazing experience. But what they were not prepared for, and what she didn't think to prepare them for, neither would I, was the reaction that they got from people outside, from their family, their friends. How when they spoke of these individuals as individuals like they are, she told me how they were chastised actually by their family and their friends, by they deserve this, da 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 da. The more they suffer, because these individuals were in prison for some really difficult, making some really difficult life choices, and being convicted of some really horrific things. But the students didn't even already always know that, but just it was the nature of the unit that they were on. And so they were completely unprepared for that. And she was completely unprepared for helping them through that. And so some of them, even that had thought about doing that as when they got out of school, were now shying away from it because of the reactions of the populace around them. So I just offer that as a really a challenge. It's that thing that, you deserve it,
Mm-hmm.
it's You know, Juanita always says we are, you know, she says, I am there to care for them, not to correct them. But
Exactly.
so that was an eye opener for all of us, and to completely unexpected, and even their parents. I mean, because these were like traditional young students, so their parents and their parents being appalled that we would take them to a prison for a clinical experience. I mean, it was just like it was just kind of like an unbelievable kind of thing to us. So I just wanted to share that. But I will say that on the other side of that, there's so many rules and regulations you gotta really stay the course to get these things in there, because oh my God, I never have seen a book like this. It was just like filled with everything you can't do,
Right.
and there's a lot of can'ts, you know. So anyway, I just wanted to offer that.
Well, thank you, Deb. It's very, I go back to my public health days when I was working with people with HIV and AIDS. And why are you working with them? You know, I'm gay, so there were my brothers and sisters and others who I knew. Um, but it, Deb, it's really too bad that that is the prejudice that is shown right up front. I mean, we have a guy right now who has hepatocellular carcinoma with metastasis, and we're working with him and with security because the other thing that, and I'm sure, Deb, that your student had to work with all of those issues with security and making sure that you can do what you need to do to care for the patient, with security, thinking security first. And those of us that are nurses or other care providers are thinking of care for the patient. And in my work with some of the security folks, I reminded the lieutenant colonel, who's the deputy superintendent there, your job is security. Our job is healthcare, or behavioral health care. And so that's how we're looking at things. You need to understand how we're looking at things and not always just look at it from the security perspective. And he kind of opened up, and it's like he said, I never thought about it that way. And I said, yeah, you really need to think about that when we're thinking about this man and what we can do for his end of life, because he's going to die there. There's no way we can get a compassionate release due to circumstances. So he's going to die in the jail. And the other issue is then the negatives that come from the press when someone dies in jail. Now, many times there may be other issues that, but somebody like this, who you know, his days are numbered. We do send him out to get blood transfusions every so often. However, he has metastasis now to his lung and to his bones. So we've started to talk about DNRs and what that entails. And he's ready. I mean, I think about Jimmy Carter right now and how he said he's ready. He's going to continue to fight. And this gentleman, yes, he said, I'm going to continue to fight. But the other challenge is if we do a full DNR, I know what's going to happen. We're going to break ribs because he's got the metastasis to his bones. So it's really a challenge to work with people in the correctional environment. So what other thoughts do people have?
David?
Dave?
So, Jim, I've not worked in a prison, but I've worked in the emergency department, which is kind of like a prison. And I've had prisoners, either
Yeah.
from the local police or something come in for emergency care. And and I've always been compassionate. And someone asked me one time, when did you decide you were a holistic nurse? And when I thought about that, I thought back to Vietnam when I wasn't a nurse and how I cared for Korean, South Korean soldiers and North Korean soldiers and Vietnamese and all of them. So I tried to care for all of those prisoners, just like I would care for my mother or dad or anybody else. Um, and it was hard with the officers because they didn't seem to want me to do that. And so now when I'm onboarding new nurses and I'm teaching them about restraints, and one of the things I talk about is when a patient comes in that's under arrest and has handcuffs on, we're still responsible for circulation and all of that sort of things, and that we have to make the officers change those cuffs around so
Mhm.
we don't get pressure injuries and those sort of things. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I've never worked in a prison, but I've worked with prisoners, and um, yeah,
It's tough, David. You bring up a good point that not all the security folks are as sensitive as I would like to see them. And so part of my role is to help them understand and be as compassionate as they can, even as they fulfill their role in security. And what's interesting is you can see the difference between some of the officers who are compassionate and work with the patient and others who lock them up and throw away the key type of thing. So always the challenge. And what's nice is I found if you work with behavioral health people, mental health personnel, they have a better handle on how to work some of this out with some of the security folks and even with some of the nurses who are not as comfortable, even though they're there and they're working, and that's great and that's fantastic. But they're still uncomfortable working in a jail or a prison setting. But you have to see persons who are incarcerated as patients, I feel.
as real people, as whole people.
Yep.
And so you have to, if you're going to restrain, you have to do it humanely and not in retribution, or you have to do it humanely.
Yep.
Thank
Jim,
you.
you have a hand, just a second, Teresa. Shirley has her hand raised, and then we'll come to you, Teresa. Shirley, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. I just came on camera to talk too. Well, going back to his question about the people on the inside, on people on the outside, I have had two brothers. The one is now deceased, but they both had form of mental illness. My Navy veteran brother has bipolar, and my brother's that is deceased had substance abuse problem. And the brother that is now deceased, it's part of his lifestyle, but he had been incarcerated many years of his life because of his lifestyle. And so I have one on the outside and one on the inside. Those people in the jail are somebody's family members. So I just feel, I can relate because my brother was there so often, or not so often, but several years of his life. So yes, they deserve care. I mean, they could be anybody's family.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then back to the question of how do you change it? What Deb said was kind of my line of thinking, but I never considered what she was saying about the discrimination is that if you could present this in like nursing schools, nursing fairs, because those are the young people that are eager to go get that. So I think that would be a good place to start. So thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. You're right. The challenge is to stop prejudice across the board, whatever it is. It seems that it's so pervasive sometimes.
Teresa?
Yeah, a couple little quick things. I have worked with nurses who, during the HIV and AIDS stuff, who refused to take care of patients that were HIV positive. And that broke my heart. These people, you know, we didn't know that this was going to happen, just like with the pandemic. It's just crazy. As far as prisoners, when I was first a nurse, I worked in a hospital that was city county, so we had prisoners there. And we even have we had a prisoners unit where when I was in the ICU, so when they were done being needed in the ICU care, they would go downstairs. And I had no clue what I was walking into. So the gate opened, took the bed and the patient and myself in, that gate closed, the next gate opened, and I went into the unit. And that second gate closed behind me. And I was like, oh, shit. But they were all very, very kind, very polite. But then I realized that, oh, yeah, if they treat the nurses shitty, their asses go back to jail. They're not going to get to stay there. So, but they were all people. And I had a guard tell me one time, I was making him take off the handcuffs. So, because we always put a washcloth under there. And I had one person a guard that wouldn't do it. And I said, well, you have to. I've got to, one, check his pulse, and two, provide skincare. And I said, we do this for patients. And he said, he's not a patient. He is not a patient. He's a prisoner. That's what the guard said. And I was just like, oh my God. I mean, it's unbelievable. But it's there. How do we change it? My thought is we have to teach young nurses that these people are people and they're not prisoners to us. They are just to the state or whomever. And we have to teach them that it's okay, that they deserve care. And for those of you who your family chastised you for this, for caring for these patients, that's appalling to me. I'm sad. I'm sorry. And you deserve extra love. But one other thing for James, real quick. My son-in-law worked with the Prince William County Police Department and helped them start a program to go with them, ride with them in the car, and teach them how to calm a situation down instead of screaming, because usually when you scream with people that have mental illness, it makes it 10,000 times worse. So he was a therapist, obviously, and worked for them for about a year, to get a program up and going and using other therapists. So we're seeing little tiny steps forward, I think, and
Yeah,
we need a lot more.
yeah, Teresa, that we're working on with some of the behavioral health folks to do the same thing with the security folks, to give them training on how to de-escalate. And we also identify persons who may have triggers because of trauma in the past. And so part of what we do is if there's somebody, Jim Welch, who can be triggered by this, you don't want to touch them, because we had someone who just could not be touched very easily without reacting in a negative way. So we work with that. I did want to, I saw that Karen had talked about and put in the chat about women that come in and being handcuffed to the delivery table. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. In Delaware, we changed some of that while I was there, so that before it used to be 4-point restraints. I mean, even during delivery. And the change that we were able to do, the compromise was only one hand needed to be cuffed to the bed rail, because there's no way that you could really deliver easily with 4-point restraints. The other thing that you can no longer do, in the past, women when they were transported that were pregnant had to have leg irons on, which can cause a problem if you fall and you're pregnant. So we were able to change that also. But it took probably, I was there for 10 years. It probably took about 5 years to get through the process to make those changes. As Deb, you were talking about, it takes a while to make the changes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Yeah, she's gonna jump off the table and run away.
Jim,
You're right, Karen.
Deb has her hand raised and Shirley's hand is up. I don't know if she has something else after Deb, go ahead. And then we'll ask Shirley if she has something else she'd like to add.
So I was just going to, you asked about the public health. So we have been sharing a lot of things about how we see prejudice in prison systems, but I have to say that I see the same thing in community health, depending on your depending on your zip code. And in Columbus, we have Columbus is a fairly complex city, like many are, and I see differences in reactions to people and reactions to what is happening to them, and a lot of it is zip code based. I'm really serious about that. And so I think that this notion of prejudice that we are fraught with expands. It's pretty expansive, and it almost is like let me see, how do I say this? If you're poor or you're don't have the same kind of thing, yeah, I don't know, or you're it just seems like we put a lot of judgment on all that kind of stuff, socioeconomic things, and what people deserve and don't deserve. I mean, that just is a fascinating thing to me, what we deserve and what we don't deserve. Because when at the end of the day we all have red blood and we all have clear tears that come out of our eyes, and so I think it's a more systemic thing than just in the prisons. Anyway, that's what I see in Columbus. And I love the idea that a couple of you are talking about, I think Teresa and Jim, about having these teams that can go out when people are having some kind of experience. So having somebody who has some education in that, and this is not diminishing anybody's role, but I don't have the education for that. And so I think it would be wonderful to have mental health specialist or whatever that person would be. And maybe that would be a nurse. I think that would be something. And just a final thought so what I say to students when I've had the privilege of being with undergraduate students, and so this is my personal belief, is that everybody has, whatever you call this, we all have a soul or an inner self or a spirit, whatever term you put on that part of us that is us. Everybody has a soul. And if we can look at people and see the soul, see the life energy before we look at the form, then we have made a step forward, perhaps, in in meeting some of these things head on. Look at the person, look at the life energy, look at them and know that they have a soul, and then see the shell or the form that encases that soul, because that is only a form. So that's just a thought I have right now.
Thank you, Deb. And I love the idea of the energetic connection that occurs when we connect spiritually to spiritually.
Yeah.
Jim, Dana is got her hand raised, so she has something she wants to ask or share.
Hi, Jim. I think this is the first time I've heard you talk, and I'm very impressed with your background and where you've worked. And I just wanted to commend you on all the work that you have done and you continue to do. It's very impressive. But I kind of was interested in joining in tonight because the population that I work in is in long-term care, and I work in Canada, so I've got the Canadian government-funded homes. And so I'm seeing a lot of correlations with the population that you work with and with what I work with, as far as high incidence of chronic illness, mental health issues, behavior issues, like dementia, overuse of antipsychotic medication, lower financial class, locked units, limited health services prior to admission, decreased funding, fewer nurses wanting to stay in this field because it's not as cool as working in, in acute care. And I'm always kind of faced with that same, I'm an educator in long-term care, and I'm always kind of faced with the same kind of questions in our department. How do we change the culture of, these environments that we're working in? And, the big thing I'm faced with is, how do we change the public perception of these populations, and, they make, it kind of more glamorous, and there's a lot more funding out there for, children or certain populations. But when it comes to people with mental illness and lower funded and so forth, it always seems to be a little bit more of a challenge. So this is a really good discussion, and I'm really, really enjoying this evening. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dana. You're on target. The problem is that public perception, and even the perception within our own profession.
Yes. Yes.
So part of what I heard tonight was we have some educators that are on the call, and maybe some educators who will listen to this, talking to the younger nurses about all the variety, the wonderful variety and diversity of settings that we have in nursing, and to try different ones, because you never know when. I mean, I never thought that, this gay white man would be working in prisons and jails. And I'm very open, so everybody knew, all the wardens knew here in Delaware, and everybody knows down where I work. But I go in there as a nurse to help. And what can I do? And I see myself with the jail as a coach. You'll like that, Karen. I really see myself as a coach to help them through the challenges that they're having, providing the best care that they can in that setting to their patients. So, I mean, one place we can start is in the nursing schools. At least that's my thought. And with friends and relatives that you might have that may make a negative comment, how can you nicely say, where did that come from? Where did that comment come from? Was it at your experience? Was it something that you heard? And many times when you start the dialogue, if somebody's willing to have a dialogue, that can lead to a better understanding. So those are my thoughts. I don't know whether anyone else has other thoughts.
Jim, I have a couple. The first one I want to share is I was raised by a holistic nurse, and one of the concepts or constructs that's extremely important to her is unconditional acceptance. And we
Mhm.
talk about it because it is so difficult to do. But one of the conversations that I had in the class was, what does that mean? And that means that we don't have to accept their behavior, but there are no throwaway people. And so that is very challenging because I think that we all make mistakes, and one of the phrases I always heard was, there by the grace of God go I. And when you look at the underserved and marginalized population percentages in the jail systems, or as Dana was talking about, in long-term care, nobody starts off as a beautiful little baby. And I mean, some of them don't have a choice because they're born addicted. But we don't say, oh, I hope my son will grow up to be an addict. I hope my daughter will be in the wrong place at the right time. I hope that, my brother isn't going to make the wrong choice. And so I think being able to help students understand the difference with unconditional acceptance is about the human being, the spirit, as Deb said. It is not about accepting that they've just wiped out the family. I came in at the VA and we had a prisoner there, and he was in 4-point restraints. And I said, first of all, you don't put people in 4-point restraints. The next question I said is, where is the key? He'd been on his back in 4-point restraints for 12 hours. They had lost the key, and they said, but it doesn't matter. And I said, what are you talking about? It did not matter because he was a prisoner in there and had killed several family members. And he said to me, you're the only one that treats me like I'm a human being. So I think we have to help students understand, separate the spirit, as Deb said, from the human behavior, and it's not easy. The other thing is, I think it's really important that we acknowledge our own ahas when they happen. And Jim and I were talking about earlier when he asked that question, and I know that my mother is one of the most amazing, accepting, non-judgmental people. But I also know, growing up as a teenager, when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to do, and I think most of us had some of those learning opportunities, it was like, you do the crime, you do the time. Well, so when he asked that question, that was the first thing, because I remember saying to my 4th grader, he said, well, Mom, what if I rob somebody? I said, if you do the crime, you're going to be responsible. And so when Jim asked that question, I thought, oh my goodness, there is that bias lurking, even though I'm not aware of it lurking, that I'm making a judgment, because the reality is that we know, especially in the population of people of color, that so many of them are innocent, or they were set up, or they got triple the sentencing that the little white wealthy boy down the street is going to get. So I think it's having those ahas and reflecting on them when they come up, and helping students to have those aha moments. And Jim, if nobody else has a question, I have a question for you. Yes, and here's a comment made about many nurses or NPs often comment that if you work in the prison, it's because why would you work there unless you couldn't get a job, right? My question is, have you had a case that was more challenging than another to see to the spirit of the individual? And how did you do that?
Well, if I understand your question, there are, right now I'm working more with the staff than with the patients because of my position. But when I was in Delaware, even in my position, I would walk through what, and Karen knows this, is Smyrna. That's our big penitentiary, which has both sentenced and unsentenced and lifers, and also it used to have death row before they outlawed it in Delaware. And I would walk through at least every other week, and there are 6,000 prisoners there, and they would walk past, and there was a guy who had seen me. He knew the bearded man who was the chief, and he stopped me and talked to me about what was going on with him. And the security officers knew that if they stopped to talk to me, they were allowed to do that. They didn't get a demotion or get something negative. And I went, because he was going to lunch, I went over to the healthcare arena to look at his chart. And he had a lot of behavioral health stuff. But the other thing that I noticed was that there was stuff going on with his family. And so what I did was after lunch, I stayed and I asked him to come to the medical unit. And we sat down and talked about what was going on and then what he could do. And then I went to the charge nurse who was there and I said, can we make sure that at least for once a week at a minimum for the next couple of weeks, he gets seen by our behavioral health folks, because he needs to go through a process. It was his mother that was dying, and he knew he wouldn't be able to see her or even go to the funeral, most likely. And so what I was able to do, and it was because he stopped me and I was able to intercede at that point. But many times they don't have somebody like me who's they're able to stop and say, hey, can I talk? And that's all he really needed. He did write me a letter later and said, thank you, Chief, for doing this. I was able to talk to Vinny. That was one of the people who worked. And it worked out really well for me. I was able to get out my feelings with her. But sometimes that's all it takes, is just the willingness to talk with someone. Because even when I looked at some of his physical stuff, some of the physical symptoms were because of his stress. And when we then looked at what else was happening after that, about 2 to 6 months later than that, his blood pressure had gone down. He didn't have the same headaches. He didn't have, symptomatology. So it was really based all on that stress that he was going through. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Mickey, but I think it's just that person to person.
Connection.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that you have to have, and you should have as a nurse. And somebody said diploma nurses. Yes, I was a diploma nurse, and that's went through, and yeah, the third month we were on the floor of Memorial Hospital, as Karen, and we were in charge. That was the way it was. But you really had that connection that I think sometimes is lost now in our teaching people how to read EKGs and how to do IVs and how to do this. But the connection, especially for holistic nursing, is with that individual.
You answered the question beautifully. And I see we have one more comment from Deb, and then I'll check to make sure nobody else has any questions or comments, just because we're about out of time. Deb?
So what a beautiful conversation. I just want to say that, and I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but I think within this, I need to also acknowledge my humanity, and there may be something that really comes up for me. And so I remember that Roshi, and of course I thought she, never had anything, a perfect human being, and she is perfect. But I remember her telling us how when she went every week and she worked with the people that were on death row, every week for like 8 years. And during that time, she realized all the biases that she had that she really didn't even know about. I mean, and here she, I mean, she's a Roshi, right? Okay, so you would, so anyway, that's my own naivety. But what she really did for me in that was allow me to own the fact that I might have a bias and I don't even know about it, or I might have a bias that I do know about, but to own it and to not turn away from it and to meet it. So, and without judging myself, without being, like super critical, but to own that that is part of me, and how do I mitigate it? How do I work through it? And having somebody help me do that without judging me, like, oh, you're a holistic nurse, you should never feel like that. Of course we all have feelings. So I think, and if I think about that on a personal level, and I think about that when I work with students too. I mean, we can set ourselves up. We are all humans, and so how do we meet those biases, those those little quirks that we have, work through them, and make sure that the person receives the care that they deserve while we're working through them, right? you know and Roshi really helped me be able to admit that that really was part of being a human. So I just want to offer that, and I don't know, it's just part of our evolution, I guess. But so thank you all for just, oh my God, what a great conversation.
Deb, when you said that, what it made me think about is how so much, I mean, our penal system is set up to punish, not rehabilitate. You have almost no chance or support or resources when you get out. I mean, who's going to get anywhere with $10 or $20 and no clothes and everything else? But with nursing students, if we can start to do exercises and have these challenging discussions about what our biases are, instead of hiding them or them being under in the dark or in the cave, we can bring them out, because when we shine light on them and we acknowledge that we're human beings, then we have the chance to separate the behavior from the individual. And then we have a chance to, deal with our feelings, because, the bottom line is, I don't believe there are any throwaway people. And I also believe that what we live, we learn, and that most of the people that are in the systems, they've had really crummy lives. And so, does that excuse the behavior? No. But does it mean that they are worthy of being treated as human beings? Absolutely. And I think that the comments that you've made, and then Dana and Jim and everybody else and David, about working with people who had done the damage to our soldiers, working in long-term care, all of that. Karen, I mean, thinking about going through labor and 4-point restraints, I mean, that's just ludicrous. I mean, we wouldn't do that to animals, would we? So I think it's understanding those commonalities and shining the light on it, because when we shine lights on things, the fungus doesn't grow. So Jim, I'm going to leave you with, let me ask really quickly, is there anybody else that wants to comment before Jim gives us a closing statement?
I don't know if sorry about my microphone was on earlier. I had turned it off, but I
good,
don't know.
Sierra.
Sorry. I was trying to fit this in. I'm going to be starting a position soon in corrections, and I worked in public health during the pandemic. I worked 10 years at acute care before that. I recently had just quit a nursing home job because my license is being put at risk. I'm finding it, there's not a lot of holistic stuff going on here in California. It's more like it's different from what I've been taught. I actually hope that the jail, I don't know what I should expect, but I'm used to that. I guess people judging from the outside. I also am taking care of a man who's a family member in the past. Well, he's an extended family member, and he's ended up homeless, and he was in jail and would tell me about how horrific it was and how they would not take care of them and make them clean their own cells. They wouldn't get good care. And it's hard. It is a challenge. I understand, because I'm dealing with home care issues and legal issues with him. but like there's a lot of
Mhm.
stress out there now, and sometimes the younger generations, they are not being taught how to have compassion, especially when you have these masks on over our face all day. And it's hard to communicate, and it's the younger generations, they do need to learn this compassion. And I guess I'm wondering now what I'm going into in the jail, if it's going to be more them telling me, oh, they don't deserve care. I don't know, but I'm trying to go into this. But what I'm hearing is, yeah, there's challenges, there's same challenges everywhere, but I guess some advice.
Jim,
Sierra, congratulations. And it's wonderful that you're willing to move into the corrections area. I have found it rewarding. It's challenging, as all of my positions have been in nursing since 1979 when I first got my license. And what I can say is gravitate toward the most positive nurse that you see and feel. Since you're a holistic nurse, gravitate toward the nurse that puts out the most positive energy when you're there at the jail or the prison.
Okay.
And
Yeah, thank
that's
you.
the person who can help you to move through it.
Yeah, and I guess I
And
don't. Thank you. Yeah, I try to do that with my mentors. I've gotten great mentors. I don't have an official holistic nursing certificate, but I find I've always been a holistic person in the way that I view my own life and my own health. And so I've walked away sometimes from situations and had to address abuse, lateral violence with nurse to nurse, and bullying. And I don't want to go into that like a fight, like I'm not looking for that, but there's times where you stand up for yourself, you stand up for rights, for people's rights. Yeah. But thank you. I'll try to find some positivity, and I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be realistic. I was off the floor. I took a break for a year and a half. I wanted to leave nursing. But then I met
glad you came back.
So I'm trying, and trying to find
Sierra,
that balance.
we're an email away. All
Okay,
these
thank you.
people are email away. And
You guys sound wonderful.
if you haven't joined HNA, I would encourage you to think about
Okay.
it, because it's a networking organization,
Okay,
whether it's conferences or chapters.
good.
Because
Yeah.
I think the challenge for people who want to practice holistically is you get really tired of swimming upstream and getting your belly scratched by those
Yeah.
rocks.
Or you end up like trying to fit in, and then try to fit into the acute care and getting abused, because I'd try to help you, like, oh, and I would be pulled into education. I would do that, and then I would do auditing, and then people
You're
don't
not
like to be
alone.
taught a lot of times because they're so resistant. They think they're licensed, that we're threatening their jobs, and there needs to be more education where people don't feel threatened to ask questions, and there's not these nurses that are eating their young. Because I would have to stand up instructors that did that to us. I'd say, why are you doing that? Please teach us. Don't make us feel like we're going to be fired or we're terrible people because we're asking questions, or
You
yeah.
should ask questions. There are no stupid questions. And, what I will say to you is I love Jim's advice, because I think you need to be surrounded by people who are philosophically aligned with your values.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find these holistic nurses, but I said I find a lot of backbiting, viciousness, and a lot of no responsibility, no accountability. Because, well, it's nice to be holistic, but it's like when you're in certain situations, you do have to have that. Who's doing vital signs? Who's doing this? And then sometimes with the younger generation, I said I'd try to be in a nurse supervisor role, and they ate me alive. And they were trying to, oh man, this nursing home. And so that was another thing. I used to be a nursing home regulator. So they automatically looked at me like I was in there going to report them to the state. And like that was my last
your
job.
values. Here, don't give up your values and what you believe in, because that will eat you up. But what I will say to you is there are those, everybody that you've heard.
Yeah, we know, we've all dealt with that.
Well, no, I mean, we're out here.
You guys are out there. Thank you. I'm like,
you're not alone. Everybody on here believes in holistic care. And Deb, I see you have a comment to share with Sierra.
Yeah, Sarah, I just, I love that Mickey, you talked to you about the HNA, and that's one venue, but we're a small group here, and we're here, and good for you taking that, taking this step. And I love that Jim has, encouraged you to find a
Thank
holistic
you.
nurse, and then you can be that holistic nurse for someone else. And
Yeah.
maybe that's how part of this change
Right.
happens.
Mhm.
It all starts with a first step, but we're here,
Okay, thank you. I didn't know this existed. I somehow got I go on YouTube a lot and I found this on there. It came up in my
Good.
feed and yeah, so good.
See,
Yeah.
there's no accidents. There's no
Sierra,
accidents.
my email is A-H,
Uh, I'm
A-H-N.
I'm sorry. Hold
Oh,
hold
no,
on.
that's all right.
I'm in the car and
You know
okay.
what? Give me
Or
your
can you send it
email.
on I can give you guys mine
Yeah, go ahead.
if you have okay, it's my first and last name, which should be on the screen, Sierra Chimenti, Sierrachim as in Mary, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, 437 at gmail.com.
437 at
At
Gmail.
gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you joined us because we've got a lot of things going on, and I see that some people, Karen had to go, but we have these conversation corners every quarter.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
also, I'm happy to email you and just touch base with you. Know that you aren't
Please.
alone.
Yeah.
You are not
Thanks.
alone. And I would say that, the starfish story about the man that walks on the beach. Do you know the story?
Is it the one where they saved just the one?
And
Wait,
when I think
the
about
one
that,
yeah.
when you make an impact on one person's life, like Jim has done, we're really impacting hundreds and thousands of people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
And I guess
know that you've made a big
Yeah.
difference in a lot of people's lives, but you'll continue to do that. And I'm
Right.
sorry that you've been abused and
It
neglected.
happens.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't make it okay.
Right.
And
But it's like I said, I feel like I'm here as an advocate and I've been in situations for a reason. And then like my gentleman, I'm trying to help. I want to ask one more thing because I'm also currently discussing because his rights and some of the things were withheld medically. He's had his medical withheld from him by an attorney who has abandoned his case and he's elderly now. So I'm trying to get the bar and the bar has not responded. So I'm doing some legal advocacy and I didn't know if there was anything like that for people who are incarcerated unfairly or if they can't get help legally a lot of times because of their mental illness, because of their abuse past, or because of things going on with them where they were homeless, they can't get back on their feet and they end up on the streets because they have no legitimate capacity to advocate for themselves, but also there is legal some issues that they were and and I didn't know if there's anything related to that getting their at least getting their medical care reinstated because I figured out how to do it now, but I'd like to be more part of that, if anything, if there isn't that
Jim?
role.
Many of the jails now are working with their Medicaid agencies,
Mm-hmm.
and Medicaid has changed the rules slightly so that
Okay.
you can get someone onto Medicaid so that
Right.
while they're incarcerated,
Right.
so that when they
Oh,
get
good.
out, they're
Then
able to
it's set
get
up better.
Medicaid.
Okay, that's good. Like a social worker and somebody working with them, a case manager,
Right.
because that can prevent
Exactly.
people from ending. It's a big problem in California, and I'm realizing I haven't lived in San Francisco for 3 years. You see the tone deafness and that disconnect of people say they care, but do you really care? What are we really doing to help?
Right.
And you don't know sometimes to talk to somebody who is incarcerated and ends up homeless
Mhm.
and has their family disown them and has no resources. And so I figured this out, and in his case was way beyond that, where the workman's comp and the lawyer was the only one that could open it, and this lawyer was basically had abandoned him because he didn't make him enough money. Then I think he may have stole some money, so we have a case with the bar, and then people just say, oh, he's crazy and he was a criminal, so don't help him, who cares about him, just ignore him. I said, it's in my vicinity here for a reason. I can't just ignore it. As a nurse, we like to solve problems. I do. And so I found out there was all these issues with that. Yes, he does have a right to medical care,
Mhm.
and
He
that
does.
he does have Medi-Cal, but because it's a back injury from workman's comp, the doctors refuse to treat it until the lawyer opens that case. That lawyer is withholding it, and everyone tells us there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. I said, I'm going to make you do something then. As nurses, isn't there they're
Yep.
right? They have a right. Everyone has a right to get medical care. And so they're blocking him. And so I just had a conversation today. I get so upset. And I said, well, I'm gonna have to go back to work, at the jail, but I want to help him because no one else is doing this legwork. And it takes calling the dialing and staying on that phone, dialing over and over till you get somebody. And it's like, still, I have a case. We have the case. We report him to the bar. They acknowledge that there's an open case. He doesn't open. Anyway, it's a whole other thing, right? And so I was just thought I'd check with you guys if anyone had any further information on advocacy. Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to take any more of your time, but appreciate you.
Sierra, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
We all hold you in a space of honor,
Thank you.
sacredness, and I think Loren is saying forensic mental health has those issues frequently. They certainly do. And because we treat people as throwaways instead of individuals, I think I go back to what do we do? And we try to save that starfish, but we need to be thinking about why are all those starfish out on the beach? And
there's regulations. They sometimes strangle your own rights, and people don't realize these regulations that they think are helping people. Sometimes it makes it harder too.
It's true. And I think it's sometimes case by case.
Sometimes, you need
welcome,
advocacy.
Sierra.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm glad
I'll follow up on that email. Sorry, I didn't have my pen and my paper.
No, I'm sorry. It's so difficult because you're trying to help an individual, and it's very, very hard when you see them.
And then you got to jump through these hoops to even get the jail job, and they keep on asking me now. They're just the systems are so broken. They're asking me to go to the TV because they didn't send it right. They are asking me to go and do this because they didn't do something. Oh God. Anyway, I'll stop. But it's like, man, it's a challenge sometimes to stay positive and want to be in nursing as somebody who has a soul. Yeah. And
well,
the younger
you need to be surrounded with people who are soul grounded.
Yeah.
That's what I would say that you have here, because we all have those days that are just impossible.
Yeah.
We all have those clients, or I think of them as clients because I'm there to serve to make us our hearts bleed. But when we have the colleagues that give you the support, it makes a huge difference. And so I say, I wish you the best of luck. I say thank you for caring for this population.
Thank you for
but
this coming
again,
across.
we'll think about resources to help you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd love to communicate with any of you further and share any email. I respect those who came before me, and that was the difference. I mean, I'm 43, and I just see the difference, and it's sad to me. I was held to such high standards, and I had such respect for my people I didn't agree with because they're older than me, and that the next generation has lost that respect. And I'm like, what happened here? Is it the pandemic? Is it all these stresses in the world now where everything's so disconnected? Everything is on Zoom and online, and like people stop caring. They start just money. It's okay. Yeah, but it's
the light again that we have to shine on those dark things. My son is 26, and I said something to him about retirement. I'm going to share this thought with you because you said what happened with these younger people. And then I'm going to let Jim do the closing statement. But what he said is, Mom, you don't understand. We don't expect to be here for retirement.
Right. Yeah.
And that stopped me cold, because when you have a generation that doesn't expect to live to be retired.
They don't expect to live.
They don't expect to live because of the climate change and all that.
Yeah, all the disasters.
I think we always need to try to, when I get really frustrated with people, and from my perspective, I try to put my therapist or my nursing hat on, step back and say, what are the feelings that are behind these behaviors? What is driving that? But Sierra, I don't know how you found it. You said Facebook or social media?
Yeah, I saw you on a YouTube. I saw James offering on there, and I thought, okay, let's try this. It sounds like what I'm doing, and I want to know more about holistic nursing anyway. And so, okay, I'll just listen, and it's great that I think I found. Yeah, it's another great.
It's called Finding Your Tribe.
Yeah,
and
trying.
Teresa is going to send you. Teresa
you.
has been out in that part of the country, and she's going to send you some information.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks you, James. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It helps. Yeah, I haven't had anyone to talk to about this that's like nurses that understand, and everyone's just like, oh, why should you care about them? And it's like, come on now.
That's right. We're sending you love and hugs.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
energy to be very successful.
Positive energy. Thank you so much.
Lots of positive energy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jim?
Well, Sarah, you bring up so many good points, as many have in this conversation corner we had tonight. I just want to say I thank you all for being here and for participating. It's not always easy to talk about those persons who are disenfranchised, who are incarcerated, who are in nursing homes, who are in whatever situation. But as Mickey said, I thank you for this tribe. And thank you for being here and being the holistic nurses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Hugs and energy and well wishes to all of you. And we will be meeting again. Yes, we'll be meeting again. And I think the next one is in May. And Sarah, get onto our website. I'll send you some information
Okay,
because we have a
I
great
did check
film
it out a
series
little.
going on
Yeah.
right now that you'd be interested in, I think.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Have a good
Thank
one.
you, everyone.
Thank you,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Namaste. You
Wonderful.
guys